Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Attivo Networks webinar, hosted in collaboration with the FS-ISAC. Our topic is Deception Technology Changes the Game on Modern-Day Attackers. I'm Helena Cooley with Attivo Networks, and with me today I have our speakers Carolyn Crandall and Joseph Salazar, both with Attivo Networks. Before we get started, though, a few housekeeping items. First, please listen by either computer audio or dial-in, but not both. All lines are muted during the webinar. However, if you have any questions or experiencing any webinar difficulties, please use the question panel, as we'll be actively monitoring it. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all attendees. Now, on to our speaker introductions. Carolyn Crandall is a technology marketing executive with over 25 years of experience in building new markets in security, networking, and storage industries. She is recognized in the industry as a global marketing authority based on her repeated demonstration of growing pre-IPO technology companies into multi-billion-dollar market leaders. Carolyn is Attivo's Chief Marketing Officer and is also an active speaker on security trends in premier financial services events, CISO forums, and other security industry events. She is connecting Attivo with customers seeking to add active defense in their security infrastructure and partner programs that extend the integration and global customer access to Attivo deception solutions. Welcome, Carolyn, to the webinar. Also joining us today is Joseph Salazar. Joseph is a veteran information security professional. He began his career in information technology and transitioned into information security. He's a retired major from the Army Reserve and has 22 years of counterintelligence, military intelligence officer, a cybersecurity officer, and in his civilian career, he's been a systems and security administrator, a computer security incident response analyst, and a security operations manager, and a computer forensic investigator. He maintains CISSP, CEH, ENCE certifications. And at Attivo Networks, he's a technical marketing engineer focusing on deception technology. Thank you both for being with us today. And Carolyn, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody joining us today. We will be talking today a brief overview of the deception technology for the financial institutions, and we'll be covering an overview of Attivo Networks technology, and then we'll also be going on to case studies. All right, so first, it's no surprise to the folks on the call today that financial institutions are a #1 target for cyber criminals. And what we're looking for today is to help position how deception technology fits into some of the challenges that you're experiencing, whether they're around reducing security breaches and theft, how you achieve compliance, how you continue to evolve your security infrastructure to deal with your transforming business models as there's more and more connectivities and mobile and digital financial experiences continue to be optimized. We'll also talk about how you can add new security controls in, so it'll help as you look to introduce innovation in ways that doesn't disrupt your current security, but augments it and makes those current infrastructure pieces even stronger. So we recognize today that there's a large investment made by financial institutions, but despite all of that, attackers are still finding ways to breach and infiltrate. And interestingly, as we've done our research, it's not always that there's holes or gaps in the particular security infrastructure, but, you know, as they call them, inadvertent actors and insiders that just make simple mistakes and give opportunity for the attackers to come inside. And so as we look at that, we're looking at security infrastructure that is not focused more on prevention, but more on how do you detect the threats once they've bypassed those security controls, and then catch them regardless of their attack vector. So whether they're trying to do reconnaissance, doing credential theft and harvesting, whether they're seeking to compromise Active Directory so that they have a better landscape or overview of where and how to attack, and also dealing with some of the tricky issues around man-in-the-middle attacks. We also recognize that the threat landscape is continuing to evolve and that it's not just about protecting at the endpoint, but also being able to scale to address networks, campus, data centers, clouds, and even into some of the specialized environments, whether they be a SWIFT network or into other things like industrial control, point of sale, or others. And so as we look at detection methodology for today, it is really trying to come up with a solution that deals with that evolving threat landscape and also the evolving attack surface. So as part of that, we believe that in order to stop the attacker, you can't just think like an attacker or only defend like a defender, but it's a combination of both. And so what we've done is we've put that into a category of active defense that not only knows how the attacker attacks, but gives you the information to know how to defend and respond at scale to these attacks, and also giving you threat intelligence about the attacks, so the tools, techniques, and procedures that an attacker will be using, indicators of compromise, and also counterintelligence so that you can take that information, share it, and then simplify and automate the incident handling and remediation behind it. And so as we look at building out a deception platform, these different pieces are taken into consideration, and also what we call standing the test of time. So in early deception technology, you rely on an attacker being surprised. Today we expect that the attacker is anticipating the attack, and that if you have simple, low-interaction emulated environments, the attacker is going to be able to identify and avoid that. So it's critical in today's world that it's not only attractive, but it appears authentic, so that even if an attacker is looking for it, that they're not able to distinguish it and avoid it. And then the third area is branching into the area of counterintelligence, which means not only can you use it to detect and stop a current attack, but also strengthen your defenses by understanding, by planting deception documents, what was the attacker looking for, where did the information end up, so that, again, gives a little bit more insight towards attribution and allows you to better anticipate the next attack and defend against it as well. So in our conversations with financial institutions, some of the challenges that we hear from them over and again is around lateral movement detection. And the conversation is how does deception provide a more efficient and effective detection method for in-network reconnaissance, credential harvesting, and also many people are intrigued by the way that deception technology works for its ability to slow down an attack, basically by letting the attacker think that they're continuing to move laterally through the network, but all the while being in a deception environment that tracks their movement and gives you a high-fidelity alert so that you can take action before the damage can be done. The other area is around credential theft-based attack. A lot of discussion around network versus endpoint types of detection technology. We firmly believe that in order to catch a detector early, you want to have deceptions both at the endpoint and also at the network level. This way you pick up endpoint and domain credential theft, and then you also can pick up some tools to give you attack path visibility so that you can understand if an attacker was going to come in through the endpoint, how would they escalate their attack based upon misconfigurations, misused credentials, orphan credentials, and things like that. The other area, and we know that financial institutions do a very good job at combating ransomware, but we also have some interesting technology not only to plant SMB shares to detect the type of attack, but also some high interaction deception which keeps the attacker building in the deception environment and giving the incident responders a chance to isolate and quarantine the infected system before it has an opportunity to compromise other systems. And so a little bit of unique functionality there if you do end up under the attack from a ransomware attacker. We talked a bit before about the evolving attack surface, and that deception is built to address all of these different environments very effectively and scalably, so that regardless of how your attack surface changes, we can change with it. Other areas gets into compliance, breach investigation, litigation, M&A visibility. And with the information that we can provide about the not only detection, but the analysis of the attack, it can be used for compliance verification, forensic reporting, very often used in pen test and red team testing as well, to be able to prove network resiliency or security resiliency and reliability. And it's also a way to evaluate latent threats, because even if you do a certain pen test or red team test at a certain period of time, this gives you ongoing visibility to threats that may be dormant but resurface at different points in time. We'll talk a little bit about the M&A visibility use case later on during the presentation, but also as a way to gain visibility into acquired companies, as well as many organizations will use it for visibility into suppliers, contractors, as well as their insiders. The last area is around the skills shortage. There are a lot of detection technologies that are available today, but they have a lot of false positives. There's labor intensity to them. And one of the things that we've done in the design of deception technology is to be able to create a product that only produces a substantiated high-fidelity alert, and that is actionable, and actionable being backed with the information so that you can immediately respond to it and shut down that attack without the need to add staff. That's both from a deployment as well as an operational perspective. And so as people look at ways to close their detection deficit, these are the conversations that we have with them around how deception helps them close those gaps and gives them additional operational efficiency. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joseph, who's going to go a little bit deeper into how this fits as a choice in your security controls and in the security stack.
Thank you. So most financial institutions have a very robust security infrastructure. They handle the perimeter very well. They've got firewalls, they've got IDS, they've got DLP, they've got all of these things that are designed to keep the attacker out. So we understand that normal security doesn't go away, and deception isn't designed to replace any of that. What we are designed to do is to fill a gap in that detection infrastructure, and that's mainly around what happens once they get past the perimeter. So for example, everyone runs firewalls, IDS, they run proxies or antivirus. Those are all signature-based. The problem is that if you don't have a signature, you don't detect the attack. Or you get a false positive because normal traffic may trigger a signature that was either poorly written or just identified a wrong string or just randomly came up. Now, current technology has sort of tried to get past this and fix that weakness in signature detection by going to things like network anomaly detection, so behavioral detection, user entity behavioral analytics, and even doing correlation and analysis for a lot of traffic logs in the SIMs. But again, the issue there is that you can run into false positives. A lot of this is very resource intensive. Tuning takes a long time to get a good baseline on what's considered normal behavior, and baselines change over time, so your behavioral signatures have to change over time as well. And the one thing that we found interesting is that a lot of these are looking for attacks, but they tend to miss them early in their attack cycle when they're doing things like stealing credentials, doing internal reconnaissance, laterally moving from system to system. And while these technologies are good, and you should be using them, there is a gap in what they can detect in that they miss credential theft and reuse attacks. So if an attacker steals a valid credential, they can go anywhere that user goes, and if it's used exactly the way that user normally would use it, UEBA would not detect that. Your SIM would not fire any false alerts because there would be no failed Windows logins, and there's no network traffic that would be anomalous enough for them to detect. So then most organizations will go to a hunt team, and hunt teams are extremely good, but they're very, very surgical. They're also really expensive to man because the expertise required to field a hunt team is extremely, extremely high. And so they tend to be very resource intensive in terms of your skill set that you need, and getting the right people onto a hunt team and keeping them there is very difficult. But they are very good at what they do, which is they're able to find things, latent threats in the network. They're able to find them without a signature, and because of their expertise, they can analyze and draw a lot of information from them. But again, it's hard to scale. They're very surgical. You can't field a hunt team of 100 people because there's just not enough expertise. And it goes back to the skill shortage that we identified earlier. So this is where deception comes into play. Deception can actually detect attacks whether they are known or unknown because we don't rely on signatures or behavior. What we look for in terms of deception is an engagement. Is putting a decoy out there and having an attacker engage with it in some meaningful way, whether it's a fake credential that's loaded, a deceptive credential that's loaded on the endpoint, or an actual decoy server that looks identical to all the production servers, with the only difference being the data. It's able to scale efficiently across your entire environment because you can place decoys in any VLAN and get full visibility on that VLAN for the difficult to detect things like man in the middle, or credential theft, or reconnaissance and lateral movement. And additionally, as Carolina said before, it actually slows the attack. It helps deflect the attacker's attention from an actual production environment onto a decoy that they think is real. So they're spending all this time attacking a decoy while you're getting all of this information about the tools they're using, what they're looking for, the methods that they're utilizing, and even the command and control addresses that they're communicating with, and you can use that to increase the defenses of your environment. The problem, though, is that most people still think of deception as just a honeypot. And that perception is difficult for most people to overcome, because that's all they've known. I mean, deception has been around for 15, 20 years when Honeybee first came out. But that's not what people think about when they think about deception. They think of a honeypot put outside for research purposes to see what's attacking your environment. But what we do in terms of deception is really more about internal threat detection and visibility. So where does that actually fit in your security stack? Well, deception is not designed to displace any existing solution. In fact, what we like to do is we like to augment those existing security solutions with that internal network visibility that is very difficult for most companies to have. And there's really not an easy way to do that in a resource-efficient manner besides deception. You can do things like do full forensic packet capture and then look for anomalous traffic, but that takes a lot of time, expertise, and resources to store all of those PCAP information. Or you can deploy internal IDSs, but then you suffer from that signature false positive problem. So as attackers work through and find ways to bypass your perimeter security and find ways to bypass the internal security, they can still be detected by deception because of the decoys and the deceptive credentials that will generate an alert if they engage with them in any meaningful way. And this accounts for all attack vectors, whether it's reconnaissance, Active Directory engagements where they query your Active Directory, which is more than happy to tell them what member accounts are available, what systems are there, what trusted domains are there, to harvested credentials and man-in-the-middle attacks. So most of the time, a lot of the focus is on the first and the last part of an attack cycle. They look for ways to either prevent a compromise from happening or to prevent the attacker from completing their mission once they've stolen and are attempting to exfiltrate their data. This is where most of that money gets spent. All of the funding, most of the effort goes into those two phases. When in fact, most of the activity that an attacker commits is in the middle phases. That's when they're establishing a foothold, escalating the privileges, moving around laterally, doing internal reconnaissance. The things that they will spend the most amount of time in your network doing are the things that most organizations are ill-equipped to detect. But this is where deception excels at detecting them. Where they are the weakest is when they're trying to move around laterally, when they're conducting reconnaissance, when they're trying to maintain a stealthy, persistent presence in your environment is where deception can actually cue in on their activity and detect them before they're ready and aware of the fact that you know they're in there. So deception is an ideal technology throughout the attack lifecycle that really focuses on where the attacker spends most of their time and most of their effort.
All right, thank you, Joseph. So from here, we're going to transition a little bit more into Attivo and Attivo deception technology. So hopefully what we've been able to achieve so far is placement of where deception fits into your security control stack and some of the value and the benefits that customers are achieving in adopting deception technology. So let's start with a backgrounder on Attivo Network. So Attivo has been shipping products since 2014, and if we look at the engineering team that's behind the design, is they have collectively over about 400 years of experience. And so this comes from experience working with McAfee, FireEye, Palo Alto, Symantec, Cisco, and others. And what this allows them to do is to not only think like an attacker, but also be prepared to defend at scale, as we talked about before. The other thing with the platform having shipped since 2014 is that it is a mature and customer-proven technology that has been rolled out in many large global deployments, and we have had over 1 million endpoint licenses sold for our endpoint deception. So it is a tried and proven technology. The company is well funded. We did both our B and C round of funding last year. C was a preemptive round given the momentum and traction that the customer saw. And we recently added Innovate to our portfolio of investors who helped us with our expansion into the Asia Pacific market. One of the unique things about Attivo is that we're not only focused on the engineering and sales of our organization, but very much so on customer success. And with that, we've added into the organization not only a typical support organization, but also many customer programs, including professional services that can help our customer with deployments, as well as ongoing health checks. And these have been very valuable for our multi-year customers to be able to see how deception is working and how they can continue to optimize the environment. And so overall, when you think about Attivo, there's 2 areas that people will generally put us in. So deception for in-network threat detection and having breadth and depth in the deception services that we offer. But also, we don't stop there, and the platform includes a focus on having incident response, automated attack analysis, and really to give an organization an overall active defense in order to address threats. All right. So getting into the portfolio, so the main product is based upon deception, where you get your network, your credential, your data, and your Active Directory deceptions. So these are your decoys, lures, and breadcrumbs. And this is then augmented with the high-fidelity and substantiated alerts that we can do because we have our own attack analysis engine. And then automations that we provide that will allow organizations to choose, either through the UI or in an automated fashion, to block, quarantine, remediate. We also don't stop there because we also believe that for many security teams, they don't have the same visibility as many network IT teams do. And so we give additional tools for visibility for adds, changes of devices on the network and how the deception network looks like as well, plus that attack path visibility based upon credentials that an attacker would try to use to escalate and move laterally through the network. And then the last area is really around not only providing the threat intelligence, the adversary, but also the counterintelligence to strengthen your defenses to optimal levels. Okay, how this fits into the actual product portfolio is the platform is called the Threat Defend Deception and Response Platform. The core technology is the bot sync, and the bot sync is where you'll find both the deception server that will project the decoys as well as run the automated attack analysis and malware analysis. It does come in either an appliance, a virtual machine, or cloud instance. There's also a central manager that is not required, but it is often preferred by organizations that are doing large global deployments in order to centralize their deployment and also their threat intelligence information. From there, you can add on ThreatStrike, which is the endpoint deception suite, which will give you the credentials and breadcrumbs for both credential theft as well as ransomware. You can add on the Threat Path, which is another license for that attack lateral path discovery and movement. Threat Direct is a VM forwarder, and this is a very popular solution for organizations with a lot of remote office branch offices or micro-segmented networks, and it basically allows an organization to very cost-effectively and without resource intensity be able to deploy deception out at the remote office and branch office. And then the last is ThreatOps. ThreatOps takes things to the next level with incident handling and response. So you do get the integrations as part of the bot sync, but if you want to be able to create repeatable playbooks based upon your company policy of how that attack information is shared and that incident handling activated, then you can add this license on, which will give you some additional benefits around that area. Overall, the portfolio is designed for the utmost in flexibility and customization, but also with a focus on ease of deployment and making sure that it scales easily. So now let's take a look at how this fits inside the network. Every one of the orange boxes that you see within here are the decoys. And basically, we sit out of band, so it is not requiring any network redesign as you put this into the network. So you'll put a bot sync in. We have different appliances that go 32 to 100 VLANs, and basically from there, using unused IP addresses, you project the decoys out It's a very efficient and scalable way to get high density of deception to obfuscate your attack surface. These are very customizable. We'll go into some of the flexibility of that in a moment, but you can have them look as server, as endpoint devices, as specialized devices on the network, as well as cloud or other routing or telecom infrastructure. And so it's really designed for the utmost in authenticity and attractiveness as an attacker seeks to do reconnaissance or engage with what they believe is a real production asset, where in fact it is just a decoy. Because it is all engagement-based, there is absolutely no reliance on signatures, known attacks, or database lookup. And again, it is a very easy and efficient way for attracting the attacker and getting them to engage and actively reveal their own presence. In addition to that, what we add on is the credentials. This is where the Threat Strike Suite comes into play. And these sit on your actual production assets. They're not an agent. They're just a very lightweight script that takes the information about credentials, user information, browser cache history, things like that, and puts that on those devices. So again, if the attacker is looking to harvest credentials and move through the network, they will be tricked into taking one of these credentials, which will lead them back to the engagement server and again reveal their presence. In addition to that, we also insert deception objects for those Active Directory attacks, so that again, as the attacker is looking to escalate their attack in that fashion, they'll be led back to us. And also it's a way for authentication. So if they are looking to validate and verify if the credentials they've taken off of the network are real or not, ours will also validate inside of that Active Directory instance as well.
So here's a real quick look, a bit deeper but still overhead, about what we actually do with and can do with the bot sync. So the goal here is to create high interaction decoys that look exactly like your production assets. So starting from the bottom up, we look at the entire evolving attack landscape and project deception in many different ways. So as you see, we can support many different cloud services, and we also make our appliance available as a cloud VM, as a hardware appliance, or as a regular VM. And the operating systems that we support is pretty much everything except for Macintosh, which is bound to a hardware license. And then we've added Cisco iOS decoys so that we can look like Cisco routers. And to the level that we can customize our stock images, because we do provide them to you as part of the appliance, we can install any application, run any service, or load any data in the decoys because they are full operating systems. But we can go even one step further than that, and we can actually import golden images that you have in your environment and use them as decoys so that an attacker cannot tell the difference between a production asset and a decoy unless they know what the data actually contains. And to add to the coverage that we have for the addressing the evolving attack surface, we can do common SCADA or ICS protocols for operational technology devices, as well as common IoT and IoE protocols so that we can look like, for example, a medical device or a fuel pump sensor or a gate control in a building, and where a lot of attackers will actually use those operational technology networks, those OT networks, to dwell and spread laterally because they're not normally monitored the same way an IT network is. And then the types of data that we can handle for user data and that we can use as decoys on the endpoint, it's pretty much any data resident in memory or stored on a disk, including credentials and even fake shares. So as you see, the breadth and depth of our deception and the comprehensiveness is rather extensive. So a little bit then about our endpoint deception. The endpoint deception really is centered around the deception breadcrumb lures. Now, these are the fake credentials that are loaded on every endpoint. So it could be remote access credentials, file servers, map shares, or application credentials, and they're really meant to be as believable as possible. As Carolyn said, we will actually look at your Active Directory and create threat strike credentials that are based on the actual existing credentials in Active Directory and just derive the credential from there. So as they're stored in the credential manager or in the a Mac OS X keychain, or even in Linux where they're stored in various places, we can make those credentials look just like every other credential on that system. And then we can actually map fake shares that are hidden to the user, but are visible if an attacker enumerates the shares across the network. So they can see these shares and go to them and find fake documents. But what's more interesting about that is that ransomware will enumerate those shares automatically, and because ransomware tries to get the most bang for buck, they will spread to those network shares to encrypt them, because that's where you can get more ransom paid because it affects more people. But what we do with that is we can actually slow down that attack by interacting it with a high interaction deception, where we additionally feed it data and throttle the network connection. So ransomware encryption operation that would normally take a minute will take 50 minutes or an hour. But what that gives the security team is time and awareness so that they can be alerted to the fact that there's a ransomware infection that's rapidly spreading, and you can actually isolate that system, give them time to automatically or manually isolate that system and take it offline so that it doesn't affect more people and spread around. Now, in addition to that, we also offer as part of ThreatStrike our ability to analyze phishing emails. Now, this is a byproduct of how we actually architect our decoys. Because they're full operating systems, we can take one and dedicate it to malware analysis. And that malware analysis will provide full forensic information for anything that detonates inside the sandbox, but we also add, in addition to that, the ability to connect it to the internet, so you can also capture command and control traffic, as well as any payloads that get dropped or any data that gets exfiltrated. Now, the interesting thing about that sandbox is that you can create a connection via email so that anyone can submit a malware sample or a suspicious email to that sandbox, and you can get the same type of analysis and flexibility so that you get full visibility on everything that happens in that malware analysis sandbox, and you'll know whether it's a bad URL, if there's a payload at the end of it, or if the attachment in that email is malicious. And so these are the various partner integrations that we have completed, and we are always adding more as we go. As you see, it's rather extensive. We can do a lot of different things with the integrations we have, distributing the ThreatStrike credentials via Force-Bound or Tanium, doing network-level blocks with firewalls, with various firewalls or proxies, and even going so far as to do endpoint isolation and quarantine using something like NAC from Carbon Black or Aruba, or using the McAfee endpoint isolation mechanism. And then we can even send all of the information that we gather, whether it's threat intelligence or adversarial intelligence, to your existing analysis tools, your SIM, your threat intelligence sharing, to do analysis and threat hunting so that you can find additional systems that may be infected in your environment. And then with our threat ops piece, we can actually automatically go so far as to generate a service ticket through ServiceNow so that those tickets automatically show up in your IT group, and they can remediate those issues before they become too widespread or get too old.
All right. So summarizing this up, as you think about deception technology and what it can do for you, so first is around the advanced detection. And with the way the technology is designed today, it is really for the modern human and automated attacker. And so threats that are known to bypass current security controls and infrastructure. And also it's a great way to look for the insider threats, contractors and suppliers, which can be very difficult, as many times they're already inside the network. Also with the distributed deception platform, you're able to get comprehensive detection both at the network and at the endpoint level, along with those data deceptions to get additional counterintelligence. In order for deception to be both attractive and authentic, it is really important to look at whether they're running an emulated or a system with real operating systems, applications, and other high interaction activities, so you get the full benefit of understanding not only the detection, but the full threat and adversary intelligence behind the attack. Other thing is really scalability. A lot of questions come up from our customers about how tried and tested is this, and will it scale not only to changing attack surfaces as I may move from a data center to a cloud environment, or as I have new types of IoT-type systems coming onto the network, and how well can this technology address it. And with the way that Attivo has designed the product, it really will evolve with the changes in your attack surface. Other things, the customer proven is really a big thing, and it's one of the things that we will lead a lot with is our customer references. We have many large global deployments that have gone out, run this both at the decoy level and also at the endpoint level for a couple years now, and it's proven, right? So we continually catch not only attackers, but also prove value in pen tests and red team tests to be able to show and demonstrate the network resiliency. The other thing that we'll hear a lot about is you know, how easy is this to deploy or operate? And one of the things that Attivo prides itself most in is the most flexible deployment and options of how you deploy the deception technology, not being reliant on an agent, and also using things like machine learning in order to automate deception campaigns and the whole deployment of deception credentials across these very large networks. And then the ability to give them visibility into attacker lateral movement and potential attack path visibility. From a detection standpoint, you get a lot of breadth and depth in the technology that we offer, but it does go further into that active defense area. And one of the things that makes Attivo very unique is the ability to use our attack analysis engine, which will correlate the information from the attack and build that out into forensic reporting and malware analysis for you, all in an automated fashion, saving you time and energy as you create these reports, and also being able to view them in things like topographical maps. And also, as Joseph showed, the different integrations have really helped our customers be able to simplify and automate their response once they do determine they have a threat in the network. A lot of times we'll say people buy Attivo Deception because it's great detection technology, but they fall in love with us for the additional feature functionality they get around the analysis and the ability to improve incident response. And it's not limited to only doing this through our user interface, but we do have API integrations that allow it to get completely integrated into your current security operations. And then the last but not least, especially for our mid-market customers, the ability to use the repeatable playbooks makes, again, the whole responding to attack much simpler and straightforward. Okay. So just to kind of roll up here before we run into some of the case studies is not all deception can be an active defense. So if you are looking at different options that are out there, make sure to kind of pressure test against the early detection piece, the ability to catch not only the endpoint credential theft, but the lateral movement, and also make sure that they're able to achieve your goals around breadth and depth of deceptions, environments, authenticity, and then also the ease of deployment. And then from a response standpoint, think about how important is it for you to not only have an attack alert that tells you have something in the network, but substantiates it with all of the information you need to quickly shut down and remediate against that attack. So, and then think about whether things like the additional vulnerability assessments are important, and having that additional visibility could save time and preventing the attacker from really getting that foothold and creating more things for you to have to clean up. And so, again, look at it from a breadth and depth of deception, but also think about the value of these other things and how it would help you with your overall security posture. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Joseph, and we're going to start to go through some case studies now.
Great. So as one of the things that we looked at when we were looking at deception for financial institutions, we saw and obviously it's been around for a little while, there's been a lot of attacks specifically against financial applications such as SWIFT. And attackers are targeting these applications because they can be leveraged particularly for financial fraud. And we saw that last year and the year before when the Bank of Bangladesh was hit, and various other attacks, the most recent of which was the the Far East Bank was hit with the SWIFT attacks. And so we've actually added a solution for SWIFT to detect such attacks to our BotSync solution. And these web pages are loaded by default. You can also, because as I said, these are full operating systems, you can also customize and load your own Swift application web pages to the decoys so that when an attacker does engage, not only will you get an alert that they're engaging, you'll know the type of malware they're using to compromise your Swift application, your Swift server infrastructure, but you also know the information that they're adding. So you'll get routing numbers, account information, you'll get mule accounts. So this is really strategic in the sense that not only are you getting early alerting, but you're getting full adversarial and threat intelligence value from the fact that you are running Swift deception in your environment. So let's talk a little about what we actually do with that. So we can create threat strike Swift credentials that we load on your endpoints. And then we can create a server, or you can install the server, or you can use the default image that we have to create a Swift front end that is actually a decoy. You can name it whatever you want, make it look just like your other Swift server infrastructure. They will have the web pages, it'll run as a Swift front end, and you can even choose to install your Swift application and run it fully if you want to. But understand, there will be actually no communication between the decoy Swift environment and the Swift network. So the bot sync will then monitor and alert for that Swift malware, and anything that it sees, it will alert you on so that you know that your Swift infrastructure is under attack. And of course, these new Swift regulations that are coming into effect is where deception can actually help with those as well. Where we see this playing is in the mandatory and certain advisory controls, we can actually detect when some of those violations occur. So for example, with the restricting internet access protocols and critical systems, we can actually detect when there's a violation of that through our deception. Or, from an advisory control, the intrusion detection, we can detect when an attacker has gotten past your perimeter and is attempting to attack things like your Swift infrastructure or your file servers or your databases. So these are things from a detection standpoint that we can help with. And then for something like validation, one of the advisory things that the new Swift regulations are looking at is penetration testing. They are advising that you validate your operational security configurations by performing a penetration test. And one of the key use cases we have found to be very effective is that we actually help in a penetration test for the defenders, for the blue team, where we can trick an attacker into engaging with the deception environment and get full visibility on everything that they do. We have story after story of attackers, penetration testers, being caught in our deception environment that the customers are giving to us, and very proud of the fact that their deception environment was able to validate that security resiliency. And there are instances where we've had a red team or a penetration test team give their evaluation report, and right after they were done, the blue team would stand up and say, yes, here's everything you did. You were interacting with a decoy for the past 2 days. Now that type of very powerful validation of the deception technology and where it can be used really helps give a perspective that you can use deception technology in very practical and efficient ways to meet a lot of these requirements. So let's talk a little bit about some of these other use cases. We've had a customer that was concerned about internal risks to the network and sensitive client information. And so they chose to install the bot sync because they wanted to get visibility into their environment. An interesting happened after they installed the bot sync. They actually saw a lot of SMB shares. Now, SMB is server messaging block. It's how you do file sharing. It's how you do sharing connections to map a network share, for example. They saw a bunch of these connections showing up on multiple endpoints, and then they saw recon scans. They were seeing what looked like reconnaissance activity going across. And what we actually found out was that there was a network administrator that had credentials. This was an insider, and he had infected a bunch of systems to scan the network. Now, the interesting part was that only the bot sync actually detected this reconnaissance activity. Nothing else. They had internal IDS, and it didn't detect it because it looked like normal traffic. the bots, and the botsync was the only one that actually detected all of this reconnaissance activity, and we were able to collect enough forensic information that the security team was able to go and terminate that network administrator and give the information to their lawyers so that they could file and perform legal actions. So without the visibility of that botsync, this insider would have had full access to enumerate the network, and we don't know what could have happened. We actually still don't know the ultimate goal that he had, but we do know that we were able to catch him before anyone else did.
Great. So the next case study that we want to talk about is one around mergers and acquisitions. And so one of our customers was concerned. They were acquiring several companies at a fairly aggressive pace, and the concern was around the lack of visibility into what might be brought onto their network when they connect these two things together and any latent security issues that may be involved there as well. So what they did was they put a bot sync inside of each of the acquired companies' security infrastructure, and they obviously had their own bot sync inside of their current existing structure. And what this gave them visibility to is as soon as they announced, they would get hit on both sides, both from the company they were acquiring and also there. And this gave them visibility into these attacks. It also gave them visibility as they connected the network into things that were coming on board. So today we all know that suppliers can be our weakest link, and this gave them visibility when people were coming in, scanning and going to places or trying to go to places that they shouldn't be on the network, so that they had the information so that they could ask very detailed questions and also make sure that they were not bringing anything onto their network that was things they didn't want on there. So again, the way they achieved this is they installed a bot sync solution at the subsidiary's network, pointing to a cloud-based central manager. This lets them access the remote network and make sure they have everything cleaned up before they put their subsidiary onto their network. And so again, very clean, very efficient way to do this, but tremendous value in making sure that they weren't bringing any latent issues over.
And then the last thing is something sort of near and dear to my heart, because I used to work for financial institutions, is we would have to do annual penetration testing to comply with various audits like FRB, right? And so this customer wanted to validate their network resiliency because they had these annual security compliance that they had to meet, and they had time and again failed multiple penetration tests because of their inability to detect them once they got past the perimeter. And so they decided to install a bot sync, hoping at least to have a fighting chance in their most latest round of penetration tests. But what they found was actually really interesting, is the pen tester compromised an endpoint, stole deceptive credentials, and engaged with a decoy for 2 or 3 days, thinking that it was actually a real system. And that was immediate value for the organization, because when they stole those credentials, during the penetration test, the security team had full visibility on everything that they were doing. They were able to track their every move to the point where they could tell what systems were that the penetration tester had accessed, because they were able to track those IPs based on what was engaging with their decoys. And so they were, for the first time, they were able to successfully pass that penetration test because they could track every move the pen tester made, and they were able to point this as something for their compliance requirements that they were able to pass. And that is really interesting because, again, we know that all financial institutions have to go through this annual audit. They have to go through and meet these requirements from the FRB, and this is just another way, another tool in the toolbox to help pass those types of tests.
So before we go on into the summary and conclusion, we did have a question that came through around GDPR and how deception technology can help with that. And there are specific articles, Article 33 around notification, and also Article 25 around data protection by design and default. And so those are definitely areas that Attivo deception technology can help by within the notification process, if you're able to detect but also provide the information behind the attack, and also be able to show that you had the means to close and respond to that attack, that will help, especially with some of these really short timelines that GDPR is introducing. you know, it's a struggle that a lot of organizations have had is okay, I know I've been attacked, but I don't really understand it enough so that when I do disclose, I still have information I need to go get. And there's always a risk with having to disclose that quickly. Is the information right? And at least with deception technology, when we do give an alert and a notification, it comes back with the information behind it and the forensic reporting that you can use behind that. The other area in Article 25, which is the data protection by design, is that if you can demonstrate that you have not only prevention but early detection mechanisms inside of the security control stack, that will also help with you defend your position in that arena. So we do have a paper that we can get to you as well if you'd like to have additional detailed information on that. So with that, let me go over to the summary. And hopefully today what you've been able to take away is where deception fits into your security stack, and that it is a complementary security control. We're not trying to replace anything, but we are trying to close that detection gap. The value of deception is both at the network and the endpoint levels for early detection, but also, as Joseph outlined, providing detection value all the way throughout the kill chain or the attack cycles. And then some of the Attivo differentiation. Not all deception is created equal, and so you need to really think through product maturity, scalability, fit into your environments, and then, of course, deception only works if it's attractive and authentic. And so what is the provider offering in that area to keep it not only authentic at the beginning, but fresh, and so that an attacker can't fingerprint and avoid it. So a few key takeaways on this. You know, we hear this time again as we talk to people, if you can't accurately say what's inside your network, and we all know that malware is everywhere, but it's a matter of understanding where are the things in your network that you need to be concerned about and catching those early, and that is where deception can be a very powerful answer for you. We close that detection deficit gap in a very efficient and accurate way, and it is substantiated. We talked about the varying types of deception, so really take a look at, is it deception or is there also value in adding that active defense? And then also it can be a very valuable tool for helping with red team and penetration tests, and it is customer proven at scale, both by customers for their deployments and also with pen testers, that it is authentic, it's scalable, and we're able to repeatedly catch people. You know, Joseph outlined some of the pen test testing, but we have numerous case studies on that as well, where even some of the best pen teams and red teams that are out there cannot find ways to avoid our detection. I do think we have a question coming in, so let me turn it over to Joseph to respond to that.
Sure. So the question is, how does a solution avoid generating predictable deception campaigns that can be detected and avoided by a knowledgeable attacker? And so how do you create business-specific context? So that's actually a very interesting question, because we do have a way to automatically learn what's in the environment and craft deception campaigns both at the network and endpoint level that will fit those environments, and then you can respin that at a moment's notice. And so this avoids the attacker's ability to fingerprint your deception infrastructure, because you can always shift it around and change it at your whim. Now, when it comes to creating business-specific context, because these are full operating systems, you have full access to everything that you can load onto it. So you can install specific applications that are unique only to your environment. You can load data that's unique only to your infrastructure, your organization, but deceptive in nature. You can load only applications that are in your environment with that golden image customization. You can make specific roles for specific decoys. If you want only internal web server, we have campaigns that are designed to look like web servers, so that you can create a specific campaign around your specific infrastructure. And all of the campaigns that we create, you can modify and adapt as you need to. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. What we give you is full flexibility in the way you deploy your deception and the way you customize it. Because again, we're not using pre-canned templates. We're not using emulation. It's a full operating system that you can customize to your heart's content. And then at any time, you can spin and scramble those campaigns, change the addresses, change the names, even down to the MAC address level, the content, the context. You can change all that so that an attacker can't tell the difference and can't fingerprint, oh, this IP is deception, I know it's deception, and you can always change that IP address and keep changing it whenever you need to, automatically or in response to an attack, or scheduled whenever you need to every week, for example. So we've taken great pains to make sure that our deception is authentic and can even deceive an attacker that knows there's deception in the environment, so then they have to keep second-guessing themselves, which is, again, an advantage in your favor, because then that attack asymmetry where the defender has to be right all the time and the attacker only has to be right once gets flipped on its head. So now the attacker also has to be right all the time, and we make that possible.
All right, I think that was our final question. Yep. Okay, I think we're good. So, all right, so I want to thank everybody for joining us today on this webinar. If you do have further questions, please reach out to your local account manager, or you can reach out to Attivo Networks directly, and we can get you connected. I appreciate your time today. A copy of the recording will be forwarded on to you, and if you are interested in receiving the GDPR or other papers, you can feel free to check out our resource center, or you can again contact us at sales or info@attivonetworks.com or my email, and we would be happy to get you further information. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day and enjoyed the session.